In the latter half of the year, public interest in security issues surrounding high-profile entertainers in South Korea intensified, particularly after several incidents involving threats against members of globally recognized music groups. Among these cases was one involving Jungkook, a member of BTS, whose daily professional activities became the subject of a comprehensive security review following a series of threatening communications. This chapter provides the contextual background necessary to understand the situation before the escalation took place. Jungkook, widely known both domestically and internationally for his role as the main vocalist of BTS, had been engaged in multiple public and private professional activities at the time of the threats. These activities included studio recording sessions, scheduled appearances, brand promotional events, and occasional interactions with fans through live streaming platforms. His schedule was coordinated and monitored by a management team within HYB Corporation, with direct oversight from a personal manager assigned to handle logistical arrangements and ensure his safety during public outings. Security protocols for artists of Jungkook's profile are typically multi-layered, consisting of transportation arrangements that minimize public exposure, the presence of trained security personnel during events, and the monitoring of digital communications that may signal potential risks. While such measures are routine, they are generally implemented discreetly to avoid unnecessary public concern and to maintain the normality of the artist's engagements. Prior to the first reported incident in this sequence, there had been isolated cases in the entertainment industry where individuals or groups had issued threats to artists through social media, email, or anonymous phone calls. These threats varied in seriousness, with some dismissed as non-credible while others necessitated direct law enforcement intervention. In Jungkook's case, the initial conditions leading up to the threats were not markedly different from the general security environment faced by other public figures of similar stature. The turning point began when an anonymous communication was sent to a channel monitored by HYB's internal security unit. While details of the message's exact content were initially withheld from public release, multiple sources confirmed that it contained language interpreted as a direct threat to Jungkook's safety. The specific medium of delivery, whether email, phone call, or social media post, was not officially disclosed in the early stages, likely due to the ongoing investigation. However, it was confirmed that the message included references to time and location, prompting heightened concern from security personnel. At this early juncture, the primary objective of Jungkook's management was to assess the credibility of the threat while maintaining his planned schedule without creating unnecessary disruption. Standard procedure in such cases involves categorizing the threat according to urgency and specificity, then coordinating with relevant law enforcement agencies if deemed credible. The internal assessment reportedly took less than 24 hours, after which the decision was made to inform local police authorities. Jungkook's manager, whose responsibilities included coordinating his daily movements, communicating with event organizers, and ensuring all security checkpoints were functional, became directly involved in the risk mitigation process. As the primary liaison between Jungkook, HYB Security, and external security contractors, the manager's role expanded significantly during this period, encompassing not just logistical planning but also direct cooperation with investigative bodies and the early phase of the situation. There was no immediate change to Jungkook's public-facing activities. Events and appearances proceeded as scheduled, though with subtle adjustments to transportation routes, the number of personnel in his security detail, and the use of controlled entry points at venues. These measures were intended to ensure that any potential threat actor would face increased difficulty in approaching or identifying Jungkook's location. From an operational standpoint, the threat incident highlighted a growing challenge in managing public figures whose careers necessitate both high visibility and physical presence at scheduled engagements. While digital platforms enable greater fan interaction, they also provide potential channels for malicious actors to send threats or collect information about an artist's whereabouts. This duality required Jungkook's team to adopt both preventive and reactive strategies, balancing public relations needs with personal safety. It is important to note that at this point in the timeline, there was no public announcement regarding the threats. All actions were conducted internally, and the broader fan community remained unaware of the situation. This approach is common in the early stages of security incidents, as premature disclosure can complicate investigative efforts and potentially encourage copycat threats. The priority was to quietly assess the scale and source of the risk before deciding on a public communication strategy. Over the following days, however, additional developments would occur that shifted the situation from an isolated incident to a pattern of repeated threats. These developments would not only increase the urgency of law enforcement involvement, but also expand the scope of the threats to include individuals closely associated with Jungkook, most notably his manager. The transition from a single targeted threat to multiple instances of harassment marked a significant escalation in the case, prompting the need for heightened security measures. The following chapter will detail the first confirmed threat incident, outlining the specific nature of the communication, the immediate steps taken by Jungkook's security team, and the initial involvement of law enforcement authorities. This foundational understanding of the early context is essential to track the progression of events that eventually led to visible police escort measures. The first concrete incident in the sequence occurred during a period when Jungkook was engaged in a mix of public and behind-the-scenes activities. Based on information later confirmed by law enforcement sources, the initial threat was identified as a direct communication referencing both his identity and an upcoming scheduled appearance. This was a significant factor in the decision to treat the matter with urgency, as the specificity of time and location within the message increased its potential credibility. The threat was reportedly received through an online channel, though the exact platform was withheld from public disclosure to avoid influencing ongoing investigative procedures. Internal security logs at HYB recorded the incident as a Category A risk, a classification reserved for situations in which a subject's safety could be compromised within a foreseeable time frame. This internal coding system was designed to streamline decision-making, ensuring that threats of higher priority received immediate attention from both corporate security and local law enforcement. Upon receipt of the message, the internal security team followed a structured protocol. This included preserving the original content of the threat, documenting the time and date of receipt, identifying the source account or phone number if available, and conducting an initial digital trace to determine whether the communication originated from a domestic or foreign location. In this case, preliminary checks indicated that the message may have been routed through multiple servers, complicating the tracing process and increasing the need for specialized cybercrime unit involvement. Within hours of the initial assessment, the incident was escalated to the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency's Cybercrime Division. The decision to involve law enforcement so early in the process was based on the potential seriousness of the threat and the possibility that additional communications might follow. A police liaison officer was assigned to coordinate directly with HYB's security representatives, creating a streamlined channel for exchanging updates, forensic findings, and logistical plans. Meanwhile, Jungkook's immediate schedule for the following days was reviewed. The management team considered whether to postpone or cancel certain appearances, but ultimately decided to proceed with caution, citing the lack of confirmed physical proximity of the threat actor. Additional precautions were implemented, such as adjusting transportation routes, altering departure and arrival times without public notice, and deploying extra personnel at key checkpoints during movements between locations. While these measures were being taken, the threat remained undisclosed to the public. This approach served two purposes. First, it avoided creating unnecessary alarm among fans and the general audience. Second, it preserved the element of unpredictability in the artist's movements, making it more difficult for a potential threat actor to track his whereabouts. Public events proceeded as planned, though security presence was subtly increased. Despite these investigative efforts, no immediate suspect was identified in the early phase. The complexity of tracing the message through multiple digital layers meant that concrete results would take time. In the meantime, Jungkook's team remained on alert, monitoring all communication channels for further incidents. This vigilance proved warranted, as subsequent events in the timeline would confirm that the first threat was not an isolated occurrence. By the end of this stage, both HYB's security personnel and the Seoul Metropolitan Police were aligned on the assessment that the situation required ongoing attention. The initial incident had moved the case from a routine security matter into a developing investigation, with protocols in place for rapid escalation if additional threats emerged. The next chapter will outline how the situation evolved from this initial message into a series of repeated and increasingly serious threats. It will detail the pattern of communications, the changes in security operations, and the growing involvement of both Jungkook's management and external law enforcement agencies. The period following the first threat marked a significant shift in the scope and intensity of the situation. What began as a single, isolated communication soon developed into a sequence of repeated threats, each carrying varying degrees of specificity and risk indicators. The escalation was not immediate but unfolded over a span of several weeks, with intervals between incidents becoming progressively shorter. The second recorded threat arrived 9 days after the first. Unlike the initial message, which had been delivered via an online platform, this one reached Jungkook's team through an email address associated with a public relations channel. The email's content contained direct references to Jungkook's recent activities, suggesting that the sender had been monitoring publicly available information such as news coverage, fan posts, or live stream replays. This demonstrated an increased level of situational awareness from the threat actor, which prompted security teams to reevaluate the credibility rating from high concern to immediate action required. At this stage, the Seoul Metropolitan Police had already classified the case as an ongoing threat investigation. Cybercrime specialists began expanding their monitoring to include open-source intelligence, OSINT, scanning, tracking specific keywords, hashtags, and geolocation data in online spaces where potential threat actors might be active. The objective was to identify whether the threats were the work of a single individual or multiple parties possibly operating independently but inspired by one another's actions. During the third week of the timeline, a third incident occurred, this time targeting not only Jungkook, but also his personal manager. The communication, again sent digitally, explicitly mentioned the manager by name and contained language that implied a willingness to act against either party. The inclusion of the manager significantly altered the risk profile. From a security perspective, targeting support staff is often a strategic move by malicious actors, as it can disrupt an artist's mobility, limit their ability to perform scheduled duties, and create psychological pressure within the team. Following this development, HYB implemented a series of reinforced operational measures. These included assigning additional plainclothes security personnel to accompany the manager during solo errands or site visits, increasing the use of private, non-branded vehicles to reduce visibility during transportation, conducting unannounced security sweeps at event venues prior to Jungkook's arrival. Law enforcement coordination also deepened. The police requested and obtained court-approved access to certain server logs and account metadata linked to the threatening communications. However, due to the multi-jurisdictional nature of internet routing, parts of the investigation required cooperation with foreign service providers. This process introduced delays, but was considered essential for building a case with prosecutable evidence. By the end of the first month, the frequency of threats had increased to an average of one incident every 4 to 5 days. The methods of delivery varied, with some messages arriving through anonymous email accounts, others posted in public online forums, and at least one instance involving a handwritten note delivered to an event site before Jungkook's scheduled appearance. The latter prompted heightened venue security and coordination with CCTV monitoring teams to review footage for potential suspects.